They hate Hezbollah because Hezbollah is treating them like equals. But on the other hand, they have a huge amount of respect for Hezbollah because Israel is a very, it's a Spartan society, a martial society. And Hezbollah has displayed tremendous military prowess. So they can't help but respect them at the same time that they hate them. And that's a problem for Israel. I've said, people don't like it, but I've said Hezbollah is in many ways not only the hope for the Arab world, but it's the greatest hope for Israel. Because the moment Israel realizes it doesn't have a military option, then it will begin to negotiate a reasonable settlement. And that's good for Israel. If it can get a reasonable settlement, and as you put it, extricate itself from this grave that they're digging. So I think Hezbollah is good for Israel. It has to stop thinking that for every problem that arises, all it has to do is come in with its artillery and its planes and just blow everything away. That's Israel. For the past 60 years, Israeli strategy can be summarized in one sentence, which they always use. It's not my idea. The Arabs only understand the language of force. That's the way you deal with Arabs. Whenever they get out of line, you take out the big club and you break it over their head. Fortunately now, with Hezbollah, they're seeing, well, maybe it's not working. They'll try again. I pity the poor Lebanese because they're going to go in a third time to try to knock them out, the Hezbollah.
You can see that happening.
Oh, it's inevitable because the Israeli attitude now is we're down, but we're not out. Give us another crack at it. So they think they can still break them. If Hezbollah manages to prevail yet again, I think you'll probably begin to see cracks in the Israeli ruling elite. And some of them will begin to think, well, you know what, maybe this strategy is not working. The only other time it happened, incidentally, was with Sadat. You have to remember, after the '67 war, Israelis were very self-confident. And they kept saying their assumption was Arabs don't understand the art of war. They don't know how to wage war. And you may know or you don't know because perhaps you're too young, but if you look at the record, they used to call the Arabs monkeys. That was their nickname for the Arabs between '67 and '73. Well, then comes along the October '73 war, and the Arabs conducted themselves quite impressively. It was totally unexpected to the Israelis. And then the Israelis began to panic that the balance was going to start shifting. And so their calculus was, it was famously put by Moshe Dayan. He says, if you remove one wheel from a car, it can no longer move. And so if you remove Egypt from the Arab front, there's no longer any military threat to Israel. So once they saw there was no longer a military option with Egypt, they negotiated a settlement, a reasonable settlement. At least it was a full withdrawal. And it's the same thing now. One hopes they're going to reach that conclusion with Lebanon. And they're already beginning to see there's no military option with Iran. And each time they discover no military option, then they start to negotiate reasonable settlements. Of course, there are others there who say, no, we're going to give it another try.
I'm going to come back to the whole region and the issue of Iran and the such. However, before that, you mentioned something in regards with how the world, or particularly Israel and the Israelis, perceive the Palestinians, and they see the people and the government all in one block. Now, and you identify that, and I would agree that this is a grave, grave mistake. However, let's look from the other side. In terms of perceiving or looking at Israel and the Israeli people and the government, is it also correct to separate the two, the government from the people, or are they one and the same? I mean, how would one from the outside perceive Israel?
Well, the government does, in its general posture towards the Arab world, the government does have a lot of support. There's no question about that, and we shouldn't fool ourselves about it. On the other hand, the Israelis are like most other people. Once you begin to show them that the policies being pursued are not in their interest, then they'll probably start to think otherwise. And You saw signs of it during the first Intifada.
Yes.
There were shifts in public opinion in Israel. Didn't go far enough before the Intifada was defeated. But you have to show Israelis that there is a reasonable settlement to extricate themselves. And two, you have to show them that it's in their interest to do it, which means you have to give them a hard time. I don't think personally, I'm not going to, I don't think you need to advocate violence. I'm not, in principle, of course, you have the right to use violence so long as you're targeting combatants and not civilians. I don't think it's really necessary in the case of the occupied territories. I think it was necessary in the case of Lebanon to expel the foreign occupiers. In the case of the occupied territories, I think there are other options. For example, once they had that decision on the wall from the World Court, if they had a real leadership, which they don't, but if they did, they could have organized 1 million Palestinians with picks, hammers, gone to the wall, started knocking it down. Of course, Israel's going to start killing them. I know that. I'm not foolish. And I'm not telling anyone, I'm not dispatching anyone to their deaths.
Yes.
But you have to remember, from 2006 to from September 2000 to the present, already 4,600 Palestinians have been killed. I say if you're willing to, you have more courage than me, and you're willing to give your life, at least do it for a strategy that can win. And I think Israel would have been placed in an impossible situation. It's going to start killing these people, and these people are going to say, but wait, we're just implementing the World Court decision.